don't want to run out of juice.
The answer to your question, Richard, yes, they will be on video, but you perhaps won't see them yet.
It's
a bit slow.
One's just come up.
The seal you'll never run out.
Mr. Herbert.
Okay.
Yep.
Can we start now, Jev?
Yeah, we're now live.
Chairman, no, can we just hold on a second? I just need to confirm we're live. Yeah, we are live, Chairman, so good to go. We'll need to do a roll call as well, please, Chairman.
Okay. Right, welcome to the Planning Committee, Daventry District Council's, that is, Planning Committee. I'm Steve Osborne, I'm Chairman of the committee. I will now go round each. I will ask Jevely to do a roll call so that you'll know who each member is and whether they're here or not. Jevely, over to you.
Right, councillors, if you could just confirm that you can hear and see, please. Councillor Alan Chandler.
Yes to both, Chairman.
Councillor Cribbin.
Yes to both.
Councillor Dabbs.
Yes to both.
Councillor Frost.
Good evening.
Councillor Harris.
Yes to both.
Councillor Irving Swift.
Yes.
Councillor James.
Yes to both.
Councillor Longley.
Yes to both.
Councillor Matton.
Yes to both. Thank you.
Councillor Parker.
Yes to both.
Councillor Robertson.
Yes to both.
Councillor Smith.
All good.
Councillor Wesley.
Yes.
And Councillor Osborne, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, as you're all aware, the meeting is a virtual meeting using video conferencing facilities, and it's been streamed live on YouTube. I'm being supported by a senior officer, in fact, director who's in charge of, well, one of his parts is in charge of his planning. I keep referring to him as Keith, but he's not Keith at all, he's Tony. So I refer to officers by their first names. So when I talk about Tony, I'm talking about the senior officer who will be helping control the meeting. You'll see two planning officers, which are Chung Phillips and who is the other one, Keith Thursfield. Again, I will refer to him in the first name. Our legal man, I very often call him just the legal man. And the very important lady who's taking the minutes of the meeting, Jevely, who you will see, well, I can see her on the top left. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Speakers who have registered to speak will have 3 minutes to speak. And when your 3 minutes is up, you will hear Jevely interrupt and say, 3 minutes, Chairman, and then I will ask you to finish speaking. After that, please don't interrupt at all. And you're not going to clap and boo and hiss and cheer. I'm sure you're not anyway. And after each planning application is heard, when each planning application is heard, there will be a proposition. Now, you'll either support that proposition or be against the proposition, and there will be a roll call which will be achieved by our young lady again, asking whether you support the proposition or not, and then the result will be. There are no applications deferred, and we get starting at the beginning of the agenda. Well, I will do when I can find it. First of all, to confirm the minutes, is it your wish that they are a true and correct record, and when possible to sign, can be signed?
Yes, please.
If you're happy with that, put your hand physically in front of you like that. So all members have done that, including Councillor Robertson. You putting your hand in front of you? Just put your hand in front of you. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that's unanimous. The minutes will be signed and they are a true record. Apologies for absence, please, Jevely.
Councillor Ken Ritchie.
Okay, otherwise I think we're a full house. Members' interests. First of all, disclosable interests. No disclosable interests. Right, party whipping arrangements.
None, Chairman.
To members of the public, that means we don't get together as groups. whether it be political or otherwise, to decide how we're going to vote before an application. There are no applications deferred this evening, and there are only 2 on the agenda. So we'll start with the very first one, which is in Ravensthorpe. So over to you, Keith.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everybody. Hopefully this screen share will work. Are you all seeing that now, the slide?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Right, this is the application site in Ravensthorpe, a former contractor's yard on the edge of the village, and this side is torque meters, which you'll see in some of the photographs. Members might recall from the minutes rather than the actual meeting that this proposal's been around for a while, and we did actually bring it to committee last November. And the decision was taken not to discuss it at the meeting, but to defer the application for a housing needs survey to be carried out. That housing needs survey has now been carried out, and the application has been amended accordingly to reflect the results of that proposal. So what is actually being proposed now is a mix of 2-storey houses, 2 and 3 bed, and 2 and 3 bed bungalows on the site. Primarily in this revised layout here, which is the latest version. The buildings on the southern side here, which is a more sensitive side, are single storey only, and then there's pairs of semis as we go round, and then this property is another bungalow, and there's a photo, sort of 3D photo display that shows you how that would be. So you come in the site this way, round that, past that bungalow, past the houses. This is the southern boundary, and these are the TPO trees on this boundary. And this is just showing the latest proposal is obviously to make it a courtyard type effect around a central open space, and this is just showing you what it would look like inside the site. Some details there of boundary treatments, which you saw some in that previous slide. I think the important thing to say is it's going to be a 1.8 metre close boarded fence down the access to protect the amenities of adjoining properties. Having said that, obviously that access has been used and controlled for several years, HGVs and machinery, etc., as part of the access into the contractor's yard. Just got some cross sections to show you, which obviously show the site falls to the south, and again the lower buildings are sitting on the southern side, and the houses are sitting up on the higher part of the site. And there's just some elevational details for you to have a quick look at, that just show you the type of and the floor space and the type of bungalows and houses that are proposed. As I say, most of the houses are, in fact all of the houses I think, are actually semi-detached, regardless of what the proposed tenure is. Some are bigger than others, obviously, and there's different details there. But it's all in accordance with what we think is acceptable in terms of looking at local village design, etc., for the design guidance. So the photographs are coming up. There we go. So this is the view from the East Haddon Road in winter, looking back towards the village. That's the roof of the torque meters building that I discussed earlier, and these are the trees. So I personally think that shows there'll be little visual impact from a distance. This is the view from the other side where the entrance is off the West Haddon Road, and again, because it's set back down a long driveway to start off with, you won't really see the site from there. And there's just some more distant views and views along various roads. So there's another view from the East Haddon Road. And this is actually what's currently in the site now. As I say, I've been there before when it was full of plant and machinery, but a lot of that's obviously gone now. But that porter cabin has been there for a very long time, to my knowledge. And then there's other various buildings and hard standing area, as I say, with trees and fences on the boundary, diesel tank. looking back towards the porter cabin, and the trees are obviously preserved. And these are some of the other buildings which are all pretty well outdated, and shall we say, if another similar use went in there, they might not be adequate and might have to be replaced. Not that we think we've necessarily got that. I just go back to just showing it in its context there. Okay. Basically, as we've said in the report, the site is on the periphery of the village, and there are arguments from the applicant to say that it's within the village confines. But I think the view taken by the planning officers, based on the wording in the policy, which is similar to the wording we used to have in our old policies, it probably lies just beyond the existing village confines. So in that sense, it is outside the confines. Having said that, policies, especially the up-to-date policy RA3 in our settlements and countryside local plan, does allow for development outside the confines in exceptional circumstances. And one of those that's identified is development meets a local identified need, which is what we say this does, because it's effectively 13 units, 5 of which are affordable. And they're the ones that are identified by the housing needs survey, and the 10 years that are proposed as part of that have been agreed with our planning policy colleagues. So they're taking the view that it complies with that part of the policy. And also another exception is support essential local services. And I think obviously more people in the village are more likely to use what facilities there are left in the village, including the village shop, which I think has now moved into the pub. Having said that, of course, the village shops have been known to come back anyway in a different form in villages like at Kilsby and whatever, where I think there's a community shop. So just because the original shop closed doesn't mean there won't be another one. And also, if it can be demonstrated that the needs, those needs that have been identified can't be met within the existing confines, which again, we feel they can't be met within the existing confines. I just see there on the plan, previous social housing was in this area, which again lay outside the confines of the village as part of the exceptions policy that we operated at that time. So basically the roads are put forward as being adoptable standards now, and I think the developers' hope and wishes that the county council will come round to that way of thinking, although there does seem to be a little uncertainty, as we've said in the report there, about whether the internal arrangements quite meet with the county council's adoption requirements. Having said that, we would pick that up by way of a planning condition, where we're basically saying, well, if it isn't adopted, we'll require some sort of management plan going forward to make sure that roads and any sewers that are done as part of that will be adopted. Yeah, and while we're mentioning sewers, it was deferred from the previous committee earlier on in September because we had some concerns about the capacity of the drainage. And if I refer you to the light reps, you'll now see that we've heard back that there is sufficient capacity, and we're also told now there won't be a reliance on the sewer that runs at the back of the houses. That the preference will be for a new sewer going down the West Haddon Road, rather than going across the back of the houses. So I think that concern has now been resolved. So, as I say, it is a balanced one, but I think our view is as well the fact that it's on brownfield land and it's immediately adjacent to what I think we could probably all agree was the confines of the village, and it's on brownfield land, given that it's a contractor's yard, a former contractor's yard, which is encouraged for reuse for housing by national policy as well as our own policy, but with the caveat that it's within the settlement. I think we're just saying this is so close to the settlement, and the fact that this won't be seen from anywhere, as I think we've seen from the photographs. Our view is that on balance, this is an acceptable proposal for this site, and it would also represent an environmental improvement. And we are recommending approval subject to a Section 106 agreement to deal with affordable housing, education provision, library provision, and as I say, if necessary, the management of any non-adopted assets that may result if agreements can't be had with the county council in particular about the adoption of the road. But subject to that being completed and the conditions and the variation of the condition that's mentioned in the late representations, then I think we're happy, Chairman, and consequently we're recommending approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. We have 3 speakers. First speaker is Mr. Wiseman, who's against the application. Mr. Wiseman, if you're there, you have 3 minutes, starting when you start speaking, sir. We can't hear you. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself? That's it. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Councillors, the summary of the members' notes for today's meeting states that it is necessary to...
Excuse me, sir. Can you stop just for a second? You appear your voice is intermittent, as if your internet is cutting on and off. I don't think it's my end. I think it's your end. Yeah, other members are getting the same thing. So I don't know whether you can correct that at all. If you can't, the easiest way to correct it, if you can't do it instantly, is to take your picture off, and then you'll the audio carries on perfectly all right. So if you're still doing it, yeah, take your picture off. Try it now.
Is that better?
Yeah, you carry on for a couple of sentences. We'll start your 3 minutes again.
Thank you. The summary of the members' notes for today's meeting states that for the redevelopment of the site to be supported by planning policy, it is necessary to demonstrate that this will respond to an identified local need by means of a housing needs survey. The resultant requirements are considered to be reflected in the latest and final version of the submitted proposals. However, we disagree as follows. 1. There is no provision for custom-stroke self-built housing despite 4 residents expressing their interests. 2. 5 bungalows are proposed, all of which are 2-bedroom units. There is a requirement for 3-bedroom units as well, as stated in the report. 3. There is good provision for affordable housing for rent, but limited provision of starter homes and shared ownership homes. Government is now strongly supporting the provision of first homes and will be changing planning regulations to require this provision at 25% or more in a scheme of new build housing. 4. The social housing within the site as now proposed is deficient, as identified in the planning officer's report, as follows. 2 units are 4 square metres too small to meet the current standards of social housing. 2 units are located too close to the annex of the adjacent farmhouse. It is not good enough to expect tenants of social housing to accept substandard accommodation and to impose unacceptable proximity to other property on either the social housing tenants or the occupier of adjacent property. Although the adjacent property is owned by the same landowner at the moment, this may not be the case in the future, and thus a new occupier would be disadvantaged by the proposed proximity. In summary, the planning officer's report clearly demonstrates that there are very good reasons why this application does not comply with the development plan and thus is contrary to policy and should be refused unless an exception is to be made to meet local needs. I have always been wary of the word needs in the title Housing Needs Survey. This need has never been demonstrated either at the pre-application consultation meeting over 2 years ago or in the number of responses to questionnaires distributed at it, 17, nor by representations to the parish council, nor by attendance at parish council meetings discussing this proposed development by anyone allegedly in need, with one exception, a family currently in affordable housing now needing an extra bedroom because of their growing family. Presumably, those wishing to downsize do not need affordable housing because their property will have a sale value more than the smaller one. And none of these respondents have purchased any of several properties, including bungalows, which have been and continue to be available on the open market in the village. It is clear that the scheme does not take the proper account of the requirements of local residents, and therefore an exception should not be made and the application should be refused as contrary to policy. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Mr. Herbert, who's speaking on behalf of the Parish Council. Mr. Herbert, can you hear me?
I can hear you, thank you.
Okay, if you'd like to start, sir.
Good evening, councillors. Your own officer's report states that there's already an oversupply of both private and affordable housing in this district against the West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy Plan, and the Daventry Settlement and Countryside Local Plan discourages large-scale developments in rural areas. Some good news is that the last two developments in the village have been affordable houses by a housing association. This year's housing survey in the village showed no exceptional need for new housing stock. Indeed, the two people we know on there whose earnings actually approach their housing aspirations have bought in the village this summer. Contrary to the applicant's claims, the school buses transport the village children to the Guilsborough and junior and secondary schools, while there's only one small preschool provider within the surrounding villages. This was vastly oversubscribed even before the charity-run provisions in Guilsborough and East Haddon closed down this spring. There is nowhere to accommodate young children in schooling in this vicinity. The applicant also maintains there is a shop and post office in the village where there has not been one for a couple of years. Just a fridge in the pub for an hour a day. Residents must travel outside of the village for basic amenities. The applicant still claims that there's a regular bus service where we've repeatedly told them there's been no public transport for years. So this travel for basic services must be by private car. The narrow country roads surrounding the village are not suitable for family cycling due to the blight of heavy lorries and the steepness of the hills, with the one to Guilsborough even being used as a Queen of the Mountains challenge in the Professional Women's Cycling Tour of Britain. The village has no infrastructure to support those who do not own cars, and your policies go against development in this situation. So I've set out why the village has neither the need for more houses nor the infrastructure to support potential residents. But now what I believe is the most precedent point. The applicant claims that this development would be within the village, and yet it's clearly outside the village boundary. Prior to this application, another was made for a smaller development in the middle of Guilsborough Road, which attracted very few observations from the parish council or parishioners, but was rejected by this committee. To quote sections of the reasons, by virtue of its appearance in this location outside of the existing village confines, would be contrary to national and development plan policies that seek to protect the character of villages and the surrounding settings of open countryside and special landscape areas. It goes on to reference the adopted Ravensthorpe Village design statement before continuing. Detrimental to the visual character of both the village fringe and adjoining rural environments, therefore contrary to policies SA R1 of the West Northamptonshire Joint Core Strategy, saved policies GN1, GN2, EN1, N42.
Sorry, Mr. Herbert, up to 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, I'll just finish off. Your precedent has been set by you in our village, and this application must also be refused for the same reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the third speaker is Mr. Collison, who's speaking on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Collison.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Matt Collison, and I'm a Chartered Town Planner and Director of CC Town Planning. I'm speaking on behalf of Kingston Real Estate, who are the applicants for the proposed development to Lingles Farm, Ravensthorpe. We welcome the officer's positive recommendation, and I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight a couple of key points which I hope the members will take into consideration in determining the application this evening. Firstly, I'd like to highlight that the applicants, Kingston Real Estate, are local developers with a commitment to building high quality homes that meet local needs. They're currently building 32 new homes on the site of the former Grange Care Home on Staverton Road in Daventry, and this is a site of predominantly 2- and 3-bed family homes and affordable housing. The applicants want to build the right homes to meet local needs. A significant amount of work has been put in to create a housing scheme and mix that is right for this site and for Ravensthorpe. The scheme has been developed and amended following feedback gained from meetings with the parish council, a public exhibition, and through extensive dialogue with the case officer, planning policy team, and housing officer. Critically, the scheme that is before members now has been developed to fully align with a housing needs survey prepared by DDC and accepted by the parish council. This ensures that the scheme is in accordance with the adopted policy RA3 of the Part 2 local plan. Some of the key changes made to the scheme during the application process include reducing the height of the houses on the southern boundary in response to concerns. These have been replaced with bungalows. Areas of open space have been increased following the parish council consultation request. The scheme has been revised and rearranged to align with the village design statement. The layout has been reduced to reduce the dominance of the parked car whilst ensuring parking provision meets standards. Whilst we note the parish council has some concerns over the development, we've worked to overcome these, and there are no technical issues or objections to this application. The site is well located to the existing village, as well as being located adjacent to Talk Meters, the largest employer in the village, and represents a very modest increase of 5% in the number of dwellings in the village, which has seen very little development over the last 30 years. In summary, this scheme addresses the identified needs of the village and fully aligns with the housing needs survey. Officers are satisfied that there are no alternative sites in the village to meet this need. This is a key point. Smaller infill plots of 1, 2 or 3 houses will not deliver any affordable housing. A larger site is needed to meet the village's identified housing needs. And a key point I want to make is policy RA3 of the Part 2 local plan was to develop to ensure limited residential development in the rural area to meet identified needs. This is precisely what this application achieves, but also on a brownfield site that is well related to the village and is visually contained. Overall, I hope that members will see the significant work that's in on this scheme over the last 2.5 years, which has resulted in a positive recommendation from your officers. I hope the committee will support the officer's recommendation and approve the application this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. That concludes the 3 speakers. The local member who has come along to speak is Councillor Micklewright. Sir, you can speak now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Firstly, just for the benefit of the members of the public, I'm not actually a member of the committee, which is why I wasn't in the roll call at the beginning, and I don't have a vote. I'm just arguing a case. My view is very much, Mr. Chairman, that this application ought to be refused. I think there is a lot wrong with it. There is more wrong with it than there is right with it. There are inaccuracies in the application, which have been alluded to by the previous speakers, whose views I completely and totally endorse. This development would, I think, be a significant blot on the landscape, what is an extremely attractive rural area. In fact, so much so that it is a special landscape area. It's the sort of piece of countryside where the views ought to be protected, not sacrificed. As the officers have pointed out in the report, and I quote, "The development does not respect the quality of tranquility." That's what the open countryside is about, and protecting that is in part our role. On a more practical level, the application has many flaws, some of which have been mentioned already. There is insufficient off-street parking for the number of houses being proposed. The predicted traffic flows, secondly, are unrealistic, and certainly unrealistic when emptying out onto what is effectively a country lane. Thirdly, there is no local and public infrastructure. The shop has been mentioned before. The shop, although the paperwork says the shop is still there, it actually closed a couple of years ago, and now there is an extremely limited service through the Checkers pub, which is fine if you want a loaf of bread, but it's not much else besides. I mean, a shop is not a cupboard, and a cupboard is not a shop, so it is inaccurate to represent that there is one there. Secondly, in that regard, there is no public transport. Public transport is also referred to in the paperwork. If this development goes ahead and affordable housing is provided, these are the sort of residents who would be likely to want to use or need to use public transport. The buses were withdrawn a few years ago, and there is now no public transport. So anybody who needs it has got a very long walk before they can find something that they can use. Local school capacity is not satisfactory for this. The report makes reference to the fact that the local primary school, especially following on from the development in recent years in Long Buckby, is now extremely full, in fact completely full, as is the local secondary school. As you will also see from the paperwork, the police also raised questions about this and described it as a bit of a crime magnet. It's the sort of development where it invites potential burglars to come in over the back fence and start breaking into properties. That seems to me to be not the sort of development that we should be encouraging. On a more legalistic level, we've already heard that the development does not conform with the Ravensthorpe Village Design Statement. there's not really a lot of point in having these things, and Ravensthorpe has put in a lot of effort into its statement, if they're simply to be set aside. Secondly, it's, as has already been mentioned, a special landscape area. It doesn't comply with the local plan, section RA3, other villages, which require it to satisfy criterion A or B. A is that it's inside the village confines. This is not inside the village confines. Yes, it's in the parish. It is not in the village. It's in open countryside. Criterion B has 3 sub-criteria, 2 of which are completely irrelevant to this. The third one is that it satisfies the local housing need, and there's scant evidence that it actually does. The local housing market is extremely healthy. The properties that go on sale in the village turn over at a reasonable rate. There is no evidence that there is any shortage of property, and nor is there any evidence of a significant need for what one might describe as affordable housing, apart apparently from one person in Northampton who would like to move to the area but can't. So in my contention, it does not satisfy the criteria of the local plan. The most critical issue here, though, is that this is in open countryside, and that is the wording of the officers in this paperwork. It is outside the village. It is in open countryside. And to quote the officers in their conclusions, this proposal is finely balanced. It's not a clear-cut yes at all. So I'm a little unsure why advocating the acceptance of it or approval of it is before you as a committee. The proposal is finely balanced. There are many reasons to turn it down, quite apart from the impact on the countryside. This is a far bigger development than Ravensthorpe has had to accommodate in recent years, and in my opinion, it should be declined. For the most part, the planning committee will take the advice of the officers and will follow it, and with good reason. There are occasions, however, where I believe, and I'm sure members would agree, it is appropriate to listen to the advice, but to conclude that it's perhaps not something to be followed on that particular occasion. I would suggest, with the greatest respect to the officers, that this is one of those occasions. So I would strongly request that the members of the committee decline this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Micklewhite. Mr. Thursfield, Keith, do you want to respond to any of the comments made?
Yes, I will.
Yeah, you have a chance now.
Okay. I'm just trying to share the screen again. Just bear with me a sec. Yeah, just picking up on some points that the various speakers have made. I mean, obviously, I'm presenting this report on behalf of the case officer and our planning policy colleagues. Parish Council seem to be saying they don't agree with the housing needs survey. They haven't agreed to the housing needs survey. There's no need. Obviously, our officers and the applicant have got together and they say a housing needs survey has been done properly and it has been agreed with the Parish Council and it does show the need. And our recommendation is put forward on that basis. In terms of the issues about protecting tranquility, I would just say, well, the existing use was a contractor's yard with all sorts of plant and machinery going in and out all day. So I can't really see that that houses are going to make a lot of difference. In terms of it being open countryside, yes, it is, but having said that, it is a brownfield site in open countryside. So from that point of view, it isn't the same as greenfields, and I will refer to it now, but it is referred to in the officer's report. But members will recall there were applications last year in Weedon where you allowed more houses than this on a greenfield site outside the village confines on the back of a housing needs survey that supported and was in that instance supported by the Parish Council, it has to be said. But I think as far as the officers are concerned, this has gone through exactly the same process. And this has the advantage of being on a brownfield site and therefore the visual improvement and environmental improvement of a brownfield site. But also, as I tried to show when we looked at the photographs, you won't actually see this development from anywhere, despite what's been said about harm to the special landscape area. That is the view from the West Haddon Road, which isn't going to change. And obviously above it is the view from the East Haddon Road in a worst case kind of winter type scenario And obviously part of the proposal is a landscaping condition to beef up any planting on the boundaries. The TPO trees, etc., are all going to be retained anyway. So I think you have to take a view really on what the harm is in terms of what visual harm is that going to cause to the special landscape area. Certainly I say none from the West Haddon Road, because you won't even be able to see it, and you can take a view on it from the East Haddon Road. In terms of local public infrastructure, I mean, it's like a lot of these other villages. Basically, it's got what it's got. As I say, there is a possibility that maybe another village shop might start off as a community project. Who knows? And now, of course, these days, a lot of people, especially since we've had the COVID crisis, are having their shopping actually delivered to them regardless of where they live. So just because there isn't a village shop doesn't mean people can't live in a rural community. There might well be no public transport, but I think it's fair to say, again, we've accepted in rural areas, the reality is people rely on the car. Even if there was a bus, it probably only came, once a day or twice a day, if that. And obviously each house is provided, including the affordable houses, with 2 parking spaces, which is the county council have said they're happy with it. There's no objection from them. And again, looking at that West Haddon Road, I can't honestly think, because if it was going to be a highway danger, I'm sure the county council would have objected to cars coming out there causing a highway danger. I mean, these things have to be seen in the context of national planning policy guidance, which also says you shouldn't really be refusing things on highway grounds, unless it's absolutely demonstrable that it's causing a major issue. And I honestly don't think it would in that location. In terms of the school capacity, etc., and the infrastructure capacity, yes, well, that's the whole point of having the SIL and the Section 106 contributions as part of the scheme. I mean, I know what was said about the police comments about burglary, but I mean, haven't lots of our villages got, by their very nature, got rear boundaries that go up to fields that surround the villages? And everybody could possibly climb over every fence in a rural area and break into the back of somebody's house. I can't personally say it's any different from that, really. As long as boundary treatments and surveillance are available, hopefully that can be minimised. As regards it being contrary to the village design statement, obviously the case officer and planning policy don't think it is, and I've had a quick look at it and I don't think it is. And in terms of reference to the previous refusal that was made by somebody, on the Gilsborough Road, I think, when they said that was refused as being contrary to policy, my recollection of that, if it's the right site that I think it is, looking at the village design statement here, is that was on a piece of land that had been identified as valued open space and was actually a greenfield site. And consequently, the officers recommended refusal. And I think it was actually refused twice and dismissed on appeal once. And to be fair, yeah, that was contrary to policy because it was building on what was then classed under our old HS22 policy in the old local plan as building on an important open space and was identified as such in the village design statement. In the village design statement now, this site isn't identified as anything really. It is what it is. And as I say, it is brownfield land. So there is an advantage, in my opinion, in replacing that commercial use, which is by the side of houses. It has to be said on the one side there, you can see the houses, with something of a similar nature to those houses and getting rid of the non-conforming use, if that's what you want to call it. But yeah, as I say, I don't honestly think it can really be seriously classed as normal greenfield open countryside that can really be seen from the surrounding area as such. It's more of a technical, well, if it's not in the village confines, the only other thing it can be is open countryside. But I would suggest in that photograph, the fields, the 2 fields you can see sort of at the front are open countryside, and where the site is behind that line of trees is technically open countryside, but I don't think most people would think of that as being open countryside that would be harmed if something was built on it. I mean, when you think there's porter cabins and stuff on there already next to torque meters, it's not really sticking out like a sore thumb, I suggest. I think that's covered most of the points I wanted to make anyway, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Right, Tony, do we have a list of speakers?
Yes, Chairman. We've got Councillors Robertson, Dabbs and Irving Swift.
Okay. Councillor Robertson for a start then.
Thank you, Chair. Now, of course, I know this area very well as I live in West Haddon, and although it's described as the West Haddon Road, it's really the West Haddon Back Road, which makes no difference to this application. It's a perfectly unused road in quite good condition. That is pretty much irrelevant to this application because it's not going to cause any huge traffic problems at all. Now, does Ravensthorpe need more housing? Well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It actually, you know, doesn't really matter that much. Ravensthorpe is a tiny village, and I think that as the way the thing has been presented, there is no doubt that this will not affect Ravensthorpe in terms of its community, other than add to it a little bit. It's a small village, I know, but nonetheless, this is a very small development in reality. It's not a huge development, it's a small development. Now, what about need? The need of the local area is, well, Daventry's local area, if you like, is for more housing, as it is in the rest of the country, as has been proven by various, various speeches we've heard from higher up government. There is no doubt about it. We need more housing in this country. It adds to that. Now, it is a very great shame that the parish council and other speakers do not agree that this development should go ahead. I don't really understand their objection. Crime, oh, it's a dreadful crime area, isn't it, Ravensthorpe? Have you ever heard any crime in Ravensthorpe? I never have, and I live in the local area. There must be some, but it must be very, very slight. That's all I can say. Now, I think that this area, being a brownfield site, has to be developed. You cannot leave it, say, for instance, as a scrapyard. Is that what you want? You cannot leave it as a half-used industrial site, not properly maintained. What would be nice? It wouldn't be too bad, would it, if we developed the place as a rather nice housing estate, tucked away and causing no problem to anybody. And that's basically all I've got to say, other than I would like, Chairman, to propose that we accept officers' advice.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do you have a seconder? If anybody wishes to second, put the hand in front of them. I see a hand in front of it. Councillor Chandler, do you wish to speak?
Yes, I do, Chairman. Thank you.
You may speak now.
Thank you very much. All I wanted to say is that what we have to follow policy. If we mean anything at all as a planning committee, we must follow our own policies, and we must follow national policies. We've heard already the nation has declared that it wishes to significantly boost the supply of housing. They have also declared that development on brownfield sites should be encouraged. There was a housing needs survey. We should always remember that a housing needs survey is not a referendum. If it shows a need and the survey is properly conducted, then we must respond to that. So it would be against our policies not to respond positively to the housing needs survey. The fact that it's just adjacent to the village boundary is against one of our policies, but it is a brownfield site, which is a national and local policy. So I have no hesitation in supporting and seconding the proposal, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. Councillor Debs.
Thank you, Chair. I think some of my questions have actually been answered, particularly by Keith in his last statement. But to me, it's a relatively simple process to agree this or not, as the case may be, that we can, I think, take that this is outside the village and therefore we can only allow a development in exceptional circumstances. And what are those exceptional circumstances where a housing need is identified? Well, the survey has been done and the officer has said that that survey is perfectly adequate. So I find it odd that there seems to be so many objections to it. And I would think if we had that, you know, the needs survey was put up to appeal and we dismissed it, I'm not sure our chances would be very good. Generally speaking, I would say I'm in favour of this for that particular reason. One or two little niggles that I've written down, and maybe the officer could come back to me on them. It has mentioned, I think it's the Parish Council has mentioned the lack of visitor parking. I don't think it's normally a standard of our developments, but I know that the County Council has parking standards, and it's visitor parking that is lacking. Is there anything that we could do to encourage an increase in the number of visitor parkings? I'm always very concerned when we are debating and approving or whatever we do with various developments, that we need to be conscious of the fact not to create the parking problems of the future. We see so many new estates where you think they're parking all over the roads, all over the pavement. What on earth has gone wrong? Well, we can't do that much about the past decisions, but let's make sure we make today's decisions as well as we can. So that's question number one for the officer, as to whether we can do anything to address the visitor parking or lack of it. And my other little niggly point, I would say again that neither of these points mean that I won't vote for this. The highways won't adopt. And okay, there must be issues with the roads or the layout, and it wouldn't be the first estate which has private roads rather than adopted roads, but I would say that it must be better for the residents to have adopted roads. What is the issue? Is there anything that could be done to address those issues and then enable that road or the roads to be adopted as you would expect?
Thank you, Councillor Dabbs. Councillor Thursfield, I'm uplifting you. Keith, would you like to answer quickly those 2 points?
Yes, Chairman. I think the answer to the first question was lack of visitor parking is a bit of a debate, shall we say, whether there is or there isn't. We haven't adopted the County Council's parking standard, as I don't think any district council in Northamptonshire adopted it, because we thought it was too strict, if you like, and couldn't really be met. I think, as you'll see from the site layout, it's a fairly constrained site in terms of trying to get the access in and trying to get it round the bends, and that partly alludes to the issue that's the second question, really, about the adoptability of the road. I mean, the county councils have their standards about radii, etc., but the road is actually wide, done to a width to adoptable standards. My understanding was there were some issues about tweaking, shall we say, various bits of bend or whatever within the actual site itself, rather than the main part of the access. And their highway consultants, the applicant's highway consultants, are satisfied that it is actually compliant with adoptable standards. So I think that is a debate that is going to be had with the county council when the time comes to say to them, well, we think it is adoptable, and this is why, and no doubt that will be resolved. But I say, just in case that situation can't be reached, there is a fallback in the planning conditions that would say, well, they've got to provide us with details of how it's going to be maintained and managed in the future, so there won't be problems of the kind of nature we had, say, at Longbuckby, I remember, several years ago now, where the road had got into such a bad state and there was council intervention to try and help repair the road. So that shouldn't happen here, whatever happens. I don't think there is a resistance to more visitor parking, to be fair, if it can be squeezed in, and I'm sure if they're looking at tweaking the actual road layout to appease the county council to make sure it is adoptable, there may well be some more room found to squeeze in a few more visitor parking spaces, and I don't think the officers would object to that, and I don't think the applicant would object to that. If it's possible, we could get some more in, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Councillor Irving Swift.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. A few things. First, there is a landscape scheme. Could we make sure that the landscape scheme is done in such a way that it's all the niggly point about the open countryside and so on, it blends so well that we don't know that you have a development behind it. But also, my bugbear is the beauty of the development. I find, unfortunately, that the type of houses do not seem to be that beautiful, and there is an opportunity. I'm sure the council, the parish council, might have been better disposed if the development will have been a bit nicer. It's a bit bland. It's a little roof at the entrance and so on. I don't know if it's brick or it's as a, you know, Northamptonshire is known for their beautiful architecture, and that, to my case, unfortunately, you look at it and you said, oh, it's again affordable houses, or a need survey says that we need for the village a low entry house. It's not because it's for modest means that it has to be ugly. So I will ask the developer to see what he could do to improve the look of the design of the houses, because I find it does a disservice to the village and to Northampton. Sure, but I don't know if the officers can do something. I'm sure the developer will have heard me, and I think the parish might be more willing to accept that development. Finally, my last point is I do think, like some councillor, and for the parish, it's a brown site, and if we refuse, will it be considered as a measure? And if it goes to appeal, what is the consequence to us? Because I do think we cannot forget about that. If we were willing to go against officer advice, what would be the consequence in terms of major, and for that, maybe that is our legal man, as the chairman would say, who has to reply to that question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I'll go to Keith first. Keith.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was just going
those points.
Yeah, I was just going to say I didn't think actually there was a lot wrong with the design of the houses. I mean, the brickwork is being proposed to reflect existing local buildings, some stone detailing added to some plots to add to visual variety and reference local precedent. But I mean, I don't think the drawing particularly does it any favours, to be honest. But I think the reality, you get a nice brick on there and a nice tile on there, and I think they look absolutely fine. I mean, they are quite simple, you know, rural dwellings, semi-detached dwellings, really, squaring sort of floor plan, or oblong, if you like, in floor plan, rectangular. It's difficult really to do a lot more with that sort of thing. Just your window openings and your detailings, but obviously we're not designing it down because it's local needs, because the majority of it actually is not local needs. The majority of it is market housing. As regards the landscaping scheme, then obviously, yes, we're always keen to make sure that we enhance what's there already and it doesn't make it stick out like a sore thumb. So it won't be a row of conifers down the back boundary for the sake of argument. So I think in that sense we're okay. In terms of, is it a major planning application? Yes, it is. And the penalties obviously are greater for refusing and losing on appeals. The penalty's losing on appeal, really, isn't it, rather than refusing it. The penalties are greater if you have an overturned appeal and it gets allowed on appeal as a major application. It counts more against the council towards putting us into the dreaded special measures. But I think, to be fair, the other issue we need to be wary of is substantiating the reason for refusal too, if there ever was one. Because obviously, again, if you fail to substantiate your reason for refusal and you're found to have been behaved unreasonably, that could also result in an award of costs against the council, as well as losing the appeal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Any more comments? Any more speakers?
Yes, Chairman. Councillor Longley and Councillor Parker.
Thank you. Councillor Longley to go first, followed by Councillor Parker. Councillor Longley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've lived in the area for in excess of 25 years, and quite honestly, I'd never even realised the place existed. So I go along with Keith's point here that we wouldn't see it. I came to the meeting tonight with a complete open mind on one way or the other. But I'm bound to say that I think Keith has covered all the points that I would and has won me over on the subject without a doubt. Now, there is one issue that has been missed though, and that is to do with schooling. In East Haddon, there's a very excellent little junior and primary school, and children from Ravensthorpe go there. Well, it's exactly the sort of development that will produce children, and that's good news for the East Haddon school. So we ought to be aware of that. So those are the points I'd make, but I would be for the application.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. Councillor Parker? We can't hear you. That's it.
Can you hear me now, Chair? Beg your
Yeah,
pardon.
I can hear you now.
Oh, sorry, Chair. Yes, the site is on the edge of the confines of the village, or just in, and apparently is an SLA. I think we have to understand the site is actually an industrial site. It's a contractor's yard, and if we accept it's on the edge in open countryside, I cannot believe the SLA includes this industrial yard, but rather the fields behind it. It meets R11 of the Western Northants Joint Core Strategy. It meets RA31 of the Part 2 local plan, and it meets Para 118C of the MPPF. I think also there are some trees down there which have TPOs on them. I don't know if Keith could actually confirm that, but it would actually shroud it very, very well. And especially with the bungalows being at the bottom of the field, of the area, I think that's exactly the right thing to do. So therefore, on balance, I actually support officers' advice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Any comments to that, Keith, or not?
Yeah, I think if I just show you the original plan, you can just see where the TPO is. Sorry, the technology's a bit slow tonight. It won't. That's it. I'm just trying to find the original.
I think it's you, Keith.
There you go. There you go. So basically, the TPO is on the green trees along that boundary, and that tree is also TPO'd. So as I say, if you go back to the photographs, you can see in the photographs in that distant view, that's torque meters. So the site's in here behind this tree cover that's kind of there already, really.
Thank you, Keith. Okay, any more speakers?
None indicated, Chairman.
Okay, we have a proposal that the application be approved as per officer's advice, which has been seconded. I shall go to Jeverley for the roll call. You either support officer's recommendation or you're against it, against the proposal. So you support the proposal or you're against it. Over to you, Jeverley.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Chandler?
For.
Councillor Cribbin?
For.
Councillor Dabbs?
For.
Councillor Frost?
For.
Councillor Harris?
For.
Councillor Irving Swift?
For.
Councillor James? Councillor James?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Longley?
For.
Councillor Matton?
For.
Councillor Parker?
For.
Councillor Robertson?
Where are you, Councillor Robertson?
He's on mute.
Councillor Robertson, you're on mute.
Four. He's saying four. Councillor Smith?
For.
Councillor Wesby?
For.
Councillor Osborne, if you are using your vote.
I'll say 4, then it's unanimous.
It's unanimous, yeah.
Okay, the application is approved. We move on to the next application, which is in East Street, Long Butby. And over to you, Chung, for the presentation.
I shall depart. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. See you anon.
Thank you, Chairman. The site is located on the south side of East Street and lies in the confines of the village of Long Butby. and it's presently occupied by a substantial two-storey dwelling, and it's associated with substantial residential curtilage. At present, there's access to the site to accommodate the existing property, and this particular proposal seeks to demolish part of a flat roof extension to the property to allow the construction of two single-storey bungalows with associated access and parking. Whilst officers recognise that the proposal does fall within the confines of the village, it's considered this particular proposal would lead to an overdevelopment and cramped formal development, which would detract from the character and appearance of this particular part of East Street, which officers feel is generally characterised by detached and semi-detached dwellings which are well set back from the highway. And as such, we're proposing this application be refused, Chairman. You'll also note from the Parish Council comments that the Parish Council are also not supportive of the proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, we have no speakers, so we'll go straight away to, well, there's two local members. You can go first, Councillor Longley.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Well, when I first had the paperwork for this, I was in two minds how to view it. So I popped down the hill, had a good look around, and the conclusion I've come to is that I'm bound to agree with the officer's view. If you look on page 49, it's overdevelopment, cramped form of development, and I think that's probably right. Invariably, it's very, very rare for me to go against the views of the parish council. They are the ones that live there. They are the ones that live with it. So it's got to be a very strong reason for me to go against that. In this case, they pointed out a whole series of points. Bit of doubt about the highways, but that's highways are only saying concerns. They're not saying absolutely against. But if you actually look at the page 50 on there, then there's a raft of policies that the officers have come up. I'm not going through them all, it'll take too long.
Yeah, there's not much we can do with.
And I think that also another point I would say is that the neighbours have objected. I'm not surprised if that was dumped in front of my back garden. I wouldn't like it. And they're referring very much to policy R1, which really is 5 reasons that you go against policy R1. And as the officers have said, they can't find one that would go against it. So I'm against the proposal as it currently stands, and I'd like to make that proposal, Chair, if I may, to go with the officer's advice.
Do you have a seconder? I can see several hands. I can't see where they're coming from. Councillor James, yeah, I can see a hand there. You second the proposal, Councillor James?
Yes, I do, yes.
Thank you very much. That, as the other local member, I think I won't make the committee meeting a lot longer. I support exactly what the proposer and the officers are saying, so I'm not going to add to it. Right, speakers, Tony.
Councillor Irving Swift and Councillor Robertson, Chairman.
Right.
Well, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. A little more to add, other than the fact that my computer seems to have gone so slowly that I couldn't put my hand down. So no, I do support the officer's advice here.
Thank you very much. Any more speakers, Tony?
None indicated, Chairman.
Right, we have a proposal that the application be refused as per officer's advice, which has been seconded. All those in favour, roll call over to you, Jeverly.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Councillor Chartler? For officer's advice, yeah. Councillor Cribbin? Councillor Dabbs? Councillor Frost? Councillor Harris? Councillor Irving Swift? Councillor James? Councillor Longley? Councillor Matton? Councillor Parker? Councillor Robertson? Councillor Smith? Councillor Wesley
4.
and Councillor Osborne.
4.
It's unanimous.
Thank you. That
That is the first in front of committee.
Yes, thank you, committee. That's 2 applications in front of committee that have both followed officers' advice in effect, and completely unanimous. That is very good. Well, that concludes the committee meeting. Thank you for all attending, and we'll see you in a few weeks' time. There should be a training session for planning members. I think it'll be before the next meeting, and it's on Article 4 directions. Okay, so
I was just
those
going
of you
to
that,
chip in, Steve. Actually, there's supposed to be a training session for members next Wednesday night, which I'm supposed to be doing. And that's just going to be looking at some of the latest changes in planning along the lines.
yes, that's right.
Yeah. So that one comes first, and then there's the one you're looking at. So I thought I'd better just jump in quick and say that.
You had better, definitely. Sorry, I forgot that. It is important because there are some, let's say, what I call nasty things that the government are doing. I used to jokingly say 10 years ago, you'll soon buy a planning application from a post office. Well, I think we're getting towards that time, and the government is making it so easy now for certain plans to go through. So it's important that we as a planning committee are aware of what the government are suggesting. So try and come to the next week's one, next Wednesday's one, and also the one on Article 4 direction, which will be done by planning policy. So with that, a very good night to you all.
Chair, can I just ask through you to Keith, is that going to be recorded, Keith, if we're not able to make it?
I wasn't planning on it. I mean, there'll be a PowerPoint presentation and maybe 1 or 2 other things that